We are in our third week of our series on faith called Audacity. And we're challenging one another just to believe God, to take him at his word, and believe that what he says is true. Paige has been sharing with you our faith journey that we've had as a family. And last week, she gave away her car. I mean, is that crazy or what? And we've had a lot of people ask, no, we don't have a new car yet. That is in God's timeline. We were just obedient. We heard the first part, which was give the car away. We didn't wait till we had an answer about what's coming down the pike. So we are being obedient. We're walking in faith right here. So we're just trying to show y'all how to do it. And hopefully we're showing you good. But if you didn't know, I'm from South Georgia. I grew up there and in the 70s, and that seems like a long time ago. But yes, I had a lot of great childhood memories in South Georgia. And being in a small town, we didn't lock our doors at night. We would get up from sun up to sundown. We would just basically migrate from house to house. We'd jump on this neighbor's trampoline, and we'd travel to the neighborhood big ditch and play all kinds of different things. We would javelin, and we would pole vault over the ditch, and I mean, we would crawl through the culverts from one road to the other side of the highway, and we just had a lot of fun as youngsters, and it was just a cool way to grow up. I really wish our kids these days could experience that. But one of the memories that I had was right across the street was my best friend's grandparents, and they had this huge magnolia tree. And it's not those ornamental magnolias that you see used a lot these days. These things are like, I don't know, 20 feet wide in diameter, and the limbs go all the way to the ground, and it goes up about 30 or 40 feet. And it's a great climbing tree. I mean, the limbs are not that big. They're actually really flexible. So we would see, the goal was to see how high that you could get up without falling, number one. And then being able to use the buoyancy of the limbs to kind of jump out, grab hold of the limb, and let it kind of ease you down to the ground. Well, this was more like a true leap of faith than really a step of faith or going out on a limb, which is today's message. But as far as I can remember, there weren't any broken bones, but there were for sure a lot of broken limbs, which my friend's grandmother was not too happy about that. But that's the cost of having kids at your house, right? Now, today we want to talk about out on a limb. Out on a limb. Have you ever felt like that you have backed yourself into a corner, either by your words that you couldn't back up, or by your actions that you hadn't really fully thought out? I'm sure that each one of us has experienced that at least once in our lives. How about a time when you felt like you were just out on a limb? You were believing God to move on your behalf, and it was a very lonely place for you. Maybe it was you and your boo, but it's an uncomfortable place to be, I'll tell you. So the phrase alone, being out on a limb, it just provokes this picture of vulnerability, right? There's nothing but the limb beneath you that prevents you from falling to your peril. The slightest breeze could knock you off balance, and certainly you're in very clear sight of anyone around you that could easily holler up and say taunting remarks or laugh at you at your current situation. They would judge you. Being out on a limb is not fun, either in the physical or spiritually. But the more I learn about the heart of our Father God and his vision specifically for our house, this is exactly the place that he's calling us to. But isn't this the MO of all the faith heroes in the Bible? Somewhere along the journey of faith, they had to go out on a limb to do something that did not seem like it was going to happen until it did. most of us would call it crazy. You know, and then I started to think about my own life, and as a believer, as a Christian, would I be remembered as someone claiming to know God, having great faith, or would I be forgotten? Will I be one of those people crazy enough to live my life out on a limb that would inspire people to say, I want to have faith like Preston Bostwick? You know, it's great that we talk about Abraham. It's great that we talk about David and their great faith, but I'm talking about you and me. Will we be known as people or heroes of the faith one day? And now I'm not talking about known by everybody, but I'm talking about people that really know you, by your kids. Will your kids refer to their mom and dad as a great woman or man of faith? Will your coworkers know you as a person of great faith? I hope that's true. But the sad part is that for most believers, we don't live our lives out on a limb. We live a safe life. And therefore, we don't get to see the full promises of God. When I think about going out on a limb, I think about people like Noah. Noah got up every day to build a boat. This guy's never even seen rain. I want you to think about this. He wasn't a trained boat builder. He didn't go to school to learn how to build boats. He literally got the instructions from God. And from those instructions, he enlisted his kids, he quit his job, and they built a boat. There had never been a drop of rain. That could be classified as crazy. And this wasn't any boat, like normal boat. It was like a ship, a massive ship. He had backed himself into a corner for sure. He was way out on a limb. And had he failed, had he missed it, we would never know the name Noah. That is, unless, of course, they wrote a history of all the epic fails of the past, the laughing stocks of the Bible. We would know his name from that list. But I want you to see that just because we're so familiar with those Bible stories sometimes, we're like, yeah, Noah, that he was a man of faith. He was a great guy. But we miss just how crazy that journey was for him. It took 15 years to build that boat. It'd be the equivalent of me getting up here one Sunday and say, okay, guys, I know you've trusted me in the past, but I have a fresh vision, a fresh word from God. And we're going to come here every week, and we're going to build a spaceship. God has told us that we're going to go to another planet. So I want you to give your tithes, bring your kids, because we're not opposed to child labor. We're going to come and we're going to build. Bring all of the metal that you can find, because metal's really expensive right now. And we're going to build us a spaceship to Mars 3. And I know it hasn't even been discovered yet, but God told us he'd meet us there in about 15 years, and we're going to change the galaxy for Christ. Now, assuming that you chose to stick around, you should go ahead and prepare yourself for some ridicule, because it's going to take 15 years, and there's bound to be plenty of haters, maybe a couple of news stations out there tracking our progress, laughing. But we're going to change the galaxy, right? You'd think I'd gone loony pretty much. But Noah did that. Noah went and built something that had never been seen. Nobody believed in him until it actually started raining. It was crazy. But when it started raining, it was called faith. Let me give you my first point this morning. What's crazy in one season will be counted as faith in another. What's crazy in one season will be counted as faith in another. Some things that we hear God asking us to do, they don't make sense. May even sound crazy, but God has ordained for it to happen. Not everybody will agree with it. You may find a few people to clap for it, but you ask somebody to co-sign for it, to actually invest their time and their resources. Wait, what? What do you want me to do? Good luck. But I really do believe that when you get a vision from God, when you hear from God, and when you live your life out on a limb and say, okay, God, this makes no sense, but if you're saying it, okay. If you're calling me to leave California and move to Cleveland, Texas, if you're asking me to quit this job and start another one, if you're asking me to give my car away, if you're asking me to stay in something, maybe it's a job, maybe it's a marriage. Because we always think it takes faith to leave something, but sometimes it takes faith to stay. But we're not talking about just men of the Bible, men and women of great faith. We're talking about people who have even blazed the trail before us. People like our founding pastors, Bob and Frida White. You know, in 1984, Brother Bob believed God, and he opened the doors of Liberty Christian Fellowship after having vowed that he would never be in ministry again. And then in 2001, while Miss Frida was battling a very formidable health issue, she obeyed God and started Operation Refuge, thrift store and food pantry. They had the faith to do something crazy, and here we all sit today because of it. And I'm sure that many people would have called them crazy on their journey. I'm sure that they felt like they were being pushed way out on a limb from time to time with no safety net. But I hope you can see their faith today. You can't tell me that belief in God does not work. But the problem is that most of us don't have real faith. We have an idea of faith. And what God wants us to do is move beyond the Sunday school, the churchy idea of faith, and really live it out in our lives. Many of the aspects of this series come from a book called Crazy Faith by Michael Todd. And if you ever have an opportunity to read it or to catch some of his podcasts, I strongly recommend it. You'll really enjoy it. But the title of this message today is in that same vein, Out on a Limb, because that equals crazy faith. Crazy faith. So the type of faith that we're talking about is out on a limb. And it's often viewed as crazy. I'm going to give you a couple of working definitions so that we're all on the same page as we move forward. And I'm telling you these because I really feel like over the next 3 weeks that we're going to go somewhere, and it's going to be pivotal that you're here, if not that you're actually listening and staying up with us, because I believe God is trying to push us corporately and even yourself individually into achieving all that God wants for you when it comes to your destiny. The word crazy means not mentally sound. Marked by thought or action that lacks thought or reason. Just doesn't make sense. There's no reason why it should be happening. The synonyms are things like insane, impractical, erratic, being out of the ordinary or unusual. Now, how many people in this room may know somebody that you would consider crazy? It's okay. This is a safe place. If you're not raising your hand, maybe you are the one we're talking about. That's all I'm saying. The reason that we would classify something or someone as crazy is because they're so unusual. Their behavior is erratic, doesn't make sense. So, okay, God, you want us to be crazy. Okay, that's what I'm hearing today. But no, I'm not talking about in some weird way that would damage the cause of Christ. All I'm saying or trying to do is trying to bring a very important biblical foundational truth into our reality. That when you follow God, and I mean really follow God, that some of the things he's going to ask you to do will seem crazy. And I mean, when you really think about it, in the world's standard, in the world's eyes, aren't we already crazy for believing in a God that nobody's ever seen? And then on top of that, we give 10% of our income to the church saying we're giving it to God. People who are relying on their own means, they would call it crazy, right? We know that just because we can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We can't see the wind, but we can certainly see the effects of the wind. It messes up our hair. Have you ever met somebody with some stinky breath? You can't see that, but I'm sure it affects you. If you're going to follow Jesus, there are going to be things that God will ask you to do, things that you can't explain, and are going to seem absolutely crazy. Now, we're not trying to be crazy just for crazy's sake. We want to add faith to the crazy and watch what happens. Watch what God does. Faith, the poor man's definition, is just trusting in something that you cannot explicitly prove. And too many people in this Google age, they want to gather all the facts before they will believe in anything. And what happens is, many times, those facts, the facts that we want, they erode the faith that we need. The facts that we want erode the faith that we need. And while you're trying to figure things out while following God, you know, our natural behavior is, well, if he tells me how he's going to do it, when he's going to do it, how much it's going to cost, then I will be obedient and do it. And God's saying, well, we're going to be here a while. Because either God shows you the mountaintop and not the path, or he shows you the path and not the mountaintop. Most of us think that we have faith, but we really don't. We think we're out there on that limb, but we have a hold of the tree, and we got a rope on top, and then we got a safety net below, because we are control freaks. We're going to have an option 1, 2, and 3 down to Z before we ever feel confident enough to move out. And so this is our definition of crazy faith. Write this down. Crazy faith is your thoughts and actions that lack reason while trusting fully in what you cannot explicitly prove. I'm going to say it one more time. Crazy faith is thoughts and actions that lack reason. They don't make sense. But let me give you some Bible. Hebrews 11:1 in the New International Version says, now faith, say that with me, now faith. Now faith, I'm going to tell you what faith is. Now faith is the confidence in what we hope for and assurance for what we do not see. A lot of you may have memorized it in the King James Version, and it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But I found this great translation in the Passion. Listen to this. It says, now faith brings into reality and becomes the foundation needed to acquire the things that we long for. And it's all the evidence required to prove what is unseen. I love that. Because it conveys hope as things that are longed for. We can't see them right now. We don't even know how they're going to happen. But in the Greek translates that hope for as to confide in. You know how you have those people that you can confide in? Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a best friend, and you can just tell your secrets to them. You can tell them all your dreams, all your hopes, right down to the very last detail. But our God is like that. When we develop that close relationship with God and confide in Him, those dreams that we have, those little details that only He could bring to reality. You see, it's not faith if you can see it. And it's not faith if it isn't fueled by hope. See, one of the enemy's greatest tactics over your life is to discourage you so much that you don't hope anymore. Because life is hard. We've all experienced hard things in life and been let down by people, by situations. Sometimes it's just hard to muster hope for anything else. Because if you don't have hope, you've taken away the fuel for faith. Because faith is the confidence in what we hope for. Faith is confidence. If there's nothing to hope for, you cannot have faith. And what ends up happening is that He allows situation after situation, bill after bill, bad relationship after bad relationship, and the enemy convinces you to stop hoping. And hoping is free. It doesn't cost you anything. Lord knows in today's economy, everything costs more, but hope is free, thank God. Some of you have stopped hoping. Stopped hoping that you'd ever get a home of your own. Because right now you're 2 months behind in your own rent. You need to hope that God would turn it around. Hope that fuels the fires of faith, that He's going to turn the situation around. You're going to move into a home and be able to pay that thing off. Some of you have stopped hoping that your wayward children would ever return home, that they would ever serve God and bring Him glory. Right now, you just dread every phone call that comes in, that somebody on the other line may say that their life has been snuffed out. And you need hope. But here's the thing, whether you know it or not, your confidence is being built right now at the level of your hope. Your confidence is being built at the level that you're willing to hope for. Remember that just enough faith that Paige talked about last week? If I can just live from month to month, if I can just survive another year. That's the level of your hope. That's where your confidence is being built. Someone out there's saying these words. He doesn't even have to love me, just don't cheat on me. When we get to that level of faith for our marriage, that we stop hoping for a healthy, happy marriage, all you're hoping for is that He doesn't cheat on you, that's where your confidence level is being built. The enemy is deceiving us, church. And all I'm trying to do today is bring faith back to the point where you start hoping again. There's nothing impossible for our God. Did you hear that? There's nothing impossible for my God. My Bible says that whatever I'm believing for in faith, my God can do it. So do you need a healing? Then start hoping for it again. Do you need to move from where you are into something different? Then start hoping for it again. And this is going to take some audacity, some moving out on a limb, some crazy faith for some of you. There's a difference between saying you have faith and actually living that faith out. There's actually a formula for faith. I'll write this down. This is the faith formula. Intellectual agreement, meaning what you think in your mind, what you think is true, plus trust equals faith. Intellectual agreement plus trust is faith. I'm going to break this down kind of like an algebra problem. So those of you who are adverse to math, let's get those brain cells firing again. I know it's been a little while since you were in school, but intellectual agreement plus faith equals trust. Plus trust equals faith. Sorry. Is that right? I've moved on. Intellectual agreement is simply believing something to be true. It means your mind has wrapped around that. You intellectually agree that something is true. Trust is actually relying on the fact that something is true. So trust is another component. It's a separate value in the formula. So let me help you understand with this demonstration. Point you to these two chairs over here. Now we can intellectually agree that these are chairs, right? We immediately recognize them as chairs, their shape. Most of us have had some experience in our past with a chair, good or bad. We would also agree that they were built and constructed to hold people or support their weight as they sit. I mean, that's typically why you make a chair. But I'd like to invite somebody up to help me demonstrate this. Jamie, come on up here for me and just stand here. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about these chairs. Took the long way around. You're a center stage kind of guy, though. I'm off to the right. So, Jamie, do you recognize these as chairs that are on the stage today? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, given the choice, which one of these chairs do you trust if you were to be asked to sit in one? Myself? Yes. No. Okay. Now, why is that?
I believe I exceed the weight limit for that one.
So, okay. If you didn't hear that, he says he believes he exceeds the weight limit for the smaller chair. What if I told you that both chairs were able to hold you up, that they were both actually exceed the weight limit, probably for you and I both? Which chair would you choose? Okay, still choosing the bigger chair. So, because even though he intellectually agreed that both chairs are built to hold him up, he would prefer the larger one. There are too many believers today that intellectually agree that Jesus is God and that God can do miracles, but they will never put their weight on it. The problem is if you don't intellectually agree and put your weight on something, you don't actually have faith in it. And so many people in this room are like, God can do miracles. Yeah, I believe that. But you haven't received a miracle because you won't put your weight on it. Do you remember when I talked about tithing in January? And I talked about how you had to have faith that God was going to take that 90% and make it go further than the 100. And unless you actually put your weight on it, you'll never know the benefits of that promise. So, Jamie, what if I told you that smaller chair right there, that's actually God's will for your life? That's the chair that God made for you. I know this one looks sure, it looks more comfortable, it looks sturdy. It's got armrest. It's the better bet, right? Which chair, now you can speak honestly, which chair would you choose?
Can you repeat the question?
If I told you that was God's will for your life, which chair would you choose? So he's saying he's going to put his trust in what he is believing me for. He believes my faith for something more than he believes his own faith. So if I were to come over here, why don't I get you to do it? Why don't you sit in that chair? Now, how does that feel?
Feels like the kindergarten again.
Do you believe that you could spend the rest of your life in that chair? Other than getting up and using the restroom, you could probably survive, right? Okay. So, to be totally honest, he is sitting in a chair that I gave him faith for. So, what if that we as a church were able to give faith to other people by putting our weight in something, putting all of our weight in something and proving that our God exists, that our God says he does what he says he'll do. Even though it doesn't look like it's going to happen on our timetable, even though that man or woman doesn't look like the one that we thought they should look like. But time and time again, we choose the thing that we feel more comfortable in because we think this is the better bet for us, instead of something that we really feel deep down in our heart that is God's will for us. We choose the sure thing. We have intellectual knowledge. We have intellectual agreement for something, but we won't put our faith in it. Thank you, Jamie, for helping me, man. Now, how much energy and time did Jamie waste standing when he could have been sitting in something that was designed to hold him up the whole time? Just because he didn't believe in theory that that chair could hold him up until he put his weight on it. So let me help somebody understand, because a lot of people won't put their weight on something because maybe they don't want to embarrass God. Maybe they don't want to say something too bold, and if it doesn't happen, then it might make God look bad. Well, let me set the record straight. You don't have to ever protect God's reputation. You lose nothing by being fully believing and fully putting your weight on his promise for you. You lose nothing. Well, Pastor, what if I believe for healing in a loved one and they never got healed? Well, then he didn't do it. But it shouldn't be because you didn't believe for it and because you weren't willing to put your weight on it. Now, as we're growing in this process of faith, are we possibly going to make a mistake? Sure. Will some of us be really overzealous and miss it from time to time? Absolutely. But I believe God will have grace for that. I believe that we should each other have grace for one another for that. He would rather us err on the side of audacity than live on the side of complacency. Now, let's be real for a moment. I'm not talking about some name it, claim it prayer. I'm talking about the promises that are yes and amen, that he says in his word are written for every believer that would believe for it. I'm talking about a word that you may have received from a prophet that has a track record that is tried and true. I'm talking about the word that you've heard directly from God in your prayer time, one-on-one, and that you believe so strong with everything within you that God is asking you to do. And some of us are all high and mighty sitting in our own plan for our life. When God says, if you would just sit in the thing that makes you a little uncomfortable, a little less stable, that causes you to trust me more, trust the manufacturer more, you would be better off. The chair right there, it's not about how good it looks. It's about who created it. It's about how it was made. And when you start trusting the plan that God has for you and walk in faith, he says he will allow you to sit in things that were designed to bring him glory. The bigger chair is really now a waste of material. Because we realize now that we could have gotten the same results if we had only trusted in the better manufacturer. Today I come to encourage somebody that faith is not just believing God can. Faith is believing and trusting that God will if you believe it. So you may be asking, why is it so important that I believe, do more than believe? Because in James 2:19, it says, you say you have faith, for you believe that there's one God. Well, good for you. Even the demons believe, and they tremble in terror. What happens is that there are churches, there are people that call themselves Christian all over this state, this country, that have the same level of faith as demons. They believe Jesus can save. They believe that people can be healed. But we don't get to experience it unless we put our weight on it. Unless you walk out on that limb, letting go of the tree and put your full weight on it. Now, I want you to write down this second point. Faith is not a foundation. Faith is the foundation. Faith is the foundation. A lot of people don't study faith or ask God to help them understand it. Yet that's where the enemy attacks us, is in our faith. Because we can't do anything without it. You can't get saved without faith, according to John 3:16. You can't pray without faith, according to Matthew 21:22. It says you can pray for anything, and if you have faith, you will receive it. In the Bible, it tells us to pray without ceasing, and whenever you ask knowing that God hears you in faith. What happens is most of us don't pray with faith. Because if you truly knew that something is yours, and knowing that something on the other side of that something is yours, and you don't get it the first time, then you go back and you pray until it happens, right? That's what faith looks like. But most of us pray one time, and when God doesn't do it, we're like, well, I guess he didn't want to do that. You don't pray, you wished. It's like walking up to a wishing well, throwing in a coin, and you're like, well, I'm hoping tomorrow's going to be a better day. God says, no, you got to get this. You have to understand the authority that you have been given in prayer and faith. You cannot pray without faith. You cannot live the abundant Christian life without faith. He's promised it to us in John 10:10. It says, if you do not have faith. So what I'm trying to communicate, and that what you should know, is that faith is confidence. It's not confidence in your prayers. It's confidence in who God is. And then it's hoped for. It's hoped for. What is it that you need to start hoping for again? What situation did you get a little bit scared of and you ran back to the trunk of the tree and hugging that thing, and you need to get back out on the limb? What seems crazy in one season will be counted as faith in another. God didn't want us to just talk about faith in this series. He wanted us to be boldly living out faith in our lives. What are you hoping for? What are you believing God for today? He's saying, if you would just believe me, if you would just boldly get out on that limb, if you would be willing to look a little foolish. If it doesn't happen, there's no penalty. But if you don't, you're missing out on everything that could happen. My prayer is that we would be a church that lives our life out on the limb. We're not going to play it safe. If we get a word from God, we're going after it. And one day, when we're long gone, there will be people calling us heroes. Not because of what we did individually, but because of what we did together. What we believed God for and what He did because of our obedience. How many of you believe that God can do whatever He wants to do? And you're going to have crazy faith with me and go out on a limb. We serve a God who is able. Somebody say, He's able. He's able to do immeasurably more than you could ask or think or imagine. And this is just the beginning. I see something starting here that others will be able to latch onto. Because we are willing to put our full weight in it, others will be able to come right alongside and be able to believe God for things in their life that they never thought were possible. Because we're being a church of faith. So I declare that you're about to do something with us, God, that stirs our hope again. That we will see dreams and visions and have crazy audacity to write it down, to tell people, to pray about it, to walk land and claim it for God's kingdom. And to be able to go on missions or do anything that God is calling you to do because you're living a bold faith. I pray that we would have stamina to stand firm in our promises. And I declare and believe that this will be a house of faith. A house of crazy faith that stands out on a limb and trusts God, and it won't be for our gain, but it'll be for His glory. Have your way in us, God. Have your way through us. And we believe it, and we declare it, and we trust you with our whole heart. If you believe it, give God a shout. Amen.